Hello everyone. Today I'd like to share with you three-card blind puzzles that come straight out of the tournament's main event. For those of you who don't know, every match in the main event is calculated by hand by myself and the Game Gurus, a group of three-card blind enthusiasts who have graciously lended a huge amount of their own time to help keep the tournament running smoothly. There are at least 2 people reviewing the outcome for any given match. If the outcome of a match is ever disputed, the larger group of Game Gurus can get involved to help make sure that everything has been done correctly. The reason I'm letting you know this is because all 3 of the puzzles I'm going to share with you are ones where at least one guru or myself made a mistake in processing a match outcome. So pay close attention because these matches may be more tricky than first meets the eye. In case you haven't done a 3-card blind puzzle before, the rules are pretty simple. It plays just like a normal game of Magic, but both players only have access to 3 cards which begin in their opening hands, and they do not lose the game for drawing a card while their library is empty. Players are also assumed to have visibility to all cards at all times, so they know the contents of their opponent's hand and other hidden zones. With that, let's start with our first puzzle. The first deck is City of Traders, Elixir of Immortality, and Lupine Prototype. And the second deck is Reality Shift, Sand Silos, and Sphinx of the Final Word. The Lupine Prototype player will be taking the first turn of the game. Pause the video and take a minute to consider what the outcome will be. Which player will win, or will it be a tie? Okay, hopefully you've taken a couple minutes here to consider the outcome of this match. Let's go through why the answer is what it is. So let's run through the game really quickly. First, the Lupine Prototype player will play City of Traders and play Lupine Prototype. Then, the Sphinx player is going to play their Sand Silos, which enters tapped. The Lupine Prototype player will then play their Elixir of Immortality and attack for 5 damage. The Sphinx player will then put a storage counter on their Sand Silos and pass the turn. The Lupine Prototype player is then going to attack for 5 again. The Sphinx player will add another storage counter and pass the turn. The Lupine player will attack for 5 again, which will notably put the Sphinx player at 5 life remaining. This means now when the Sphinx player takes their turn, they are going to have to untap the Sand Silos to make sure that they have Reality Shift at the ready to protect themselves from lethal damage. Because Reality Shift is an instant, the Sphinx player can pass the turn with Sand Silos untapped and at the ready. Okay, if you made a mistake on this match, it was going to be right here. The Lupine Prototype player is going to attack, and this is going to force the Sphinx player to respond by casting Reality Shift, targeting Lupine Prototype. The trick here is that the Lupine Prototype player has a response that they can make. They activate Elixir of Immortality while Reality Shift is on the stack, which notably will put the Elixir of Immortality back into their own library. This means that when Reality Shift resolves, Lupine Prototype will be exiled, but there is now an Elixir of Immortality in the Lupine Prototype player's deck, which will manifest into a 2/2. Because Sand Silos is back down to 0 counters, that 2/2 is more than enough to wrap up the game because the Sphinx player is still only at 5 life. Let's move on to our next puzzle. And the decks involved are Cavern of Souls, Hexdrinker, and the Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale versus Dark Depths, Ebon Stronghold, and Vampire Hexmage. Okay, again, I'm going to ask you to take a second here to consider what the outcome of the match would be, and then restart the video. Alright, now that you've taken a minute to consider the outcome of this match, I confess that this was sort of a trick. That being said, it is a trick that I have personally fallen for, so I don't think it's that unfair for me to present this the way I did. If you were to look up the Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale on Scryfall, the default for the image it shows you is from Magic Online, and it is evidently an out-of-date image. And in the image, the text on the card reads, "All creatures have, at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this creature unless you pay 1." If this was in fact how the card worked today, the Hexdrinker player would win the game because the Dark Depths player would be forced to sacrifice their Murat Lage and can't defend themselves any other way. That's where the trick comes in. If you look at the original printing of the Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale, you'll notice the card uses the word destroy and not sacrifice. At some point in this card's history, the rules were changed to have that destroy be changed to sacrifice, but then that change was reverted. So the current functionality of the card is identical to the original printing of the card. So the Oracle text on the card is all creatures have at the beginning of your upkeep, destroy this creature unless you pay 1. Now, because Marit Lage is indestructible, Marit Lage cannot be destroyed, which means that the Dark Depths player will win this match despite the highly misleading image that I showed you. Alright, for our last puzzle, the 2 decks are Lupine Prototype, Mishra's Workshop, and Wheel of Torture versus Sandstone Needle, Shattering Spree, and Vexing Shusher. Once again, I'm going to give you a minute here to consider what the outcome of the match will be, and then you can rejoin me when we cover the solution. Okay, now that you've taken a bit of time to consider what the outcome will be, let's cover how this plays out. Alright, so the trick here is going to be for the Vexing Shusher player to do nothing, and force the Lupine Prototype player to take the initiative. The Lupine Prototype player can start by playing Lupine Prototype, but if they do, Lupine Prototype can't attack unless at least one player at the table has an empty hand. This would mean that they would need to also play their Wheel of Torture to empty their own hand, because the Vexing Shusher player is not going to be playing any of their cards. Once the Lupine Prototype player has committed both Lupine Prototype and Wheel of Torture to the board, the Vexing Shusher player can very easily use their Shattering Spree replicated to blow up both the Prototype and the Wheel of Torture. If this happens, they can then play their Vexing Shusher to close out the game. So there's the problem that the Lupine Prototype player is facing. They can't play both of their artifacts because if they do, they lose the game. So they have to play just one. And we've already covered that Lupine Prototype can't attack if it's the only card that they're going to play. If they choose to try to play the Wheel of Torture first, they face a similar issue, which is that Wheel of Torture can't do damage unless the opposing player starts to empty their own hand. And as we covered, the Vexing Shusher player is not going to play any of their cards. So the game is going to end in a tie, where the Lupine Prototype player is going to play their Wheel of Torture and pass the turn, and the Vexing Shusher player is going to play nothing so that they take no damage from the Wheel of Torture, which results in a situation where neither player can do any damage or wants to play any of their remaining cards, so the game ends in a stalemate. Alright, so that covers all 3 of our quick puzzles for today. If you found these puzzles interesting, I do highly recommend you check out the rest of my YouTube channel, or consider joining the Discord where you can find a lot of other puzzles like these that you can challenge yourself with. Thanks for watching, everyone, and see you soon.